The universe had been quiet for centuries, with peace reigning across the galaxy. However, this peace was shattered the moment the Zorath Empire, a race known for its immense power, decided to expand their dominion. They had already conquered dozens of planets, leaving no survivors. Their fleet of warships was unrivaled, and their technology was light years ahead of anything humanity had ever seen. The Zorath Empire believed they were invincible, and no one could challenge them. Then, Earth became the next target. On Earth, no one had expected such an advanced alien race to even know of their existence. The humans had always thought themselves insignificant in the grand scheme of the cosmos. But now, with a new and terrifying reality on their doorstep, the fate of the planet was in the hands of a few. At first, humanity didn't even notice the signs. Unexplained signals were detected, but no one paid them much attention. It wasn't until a massive cloaked ship appeared in Earth's atmosphere that the seriousness of the situation was realized. The Zorath warships, which were almost impossible to detect with conventional human technology, had entered the solar system. A global emergency meeting was held, where the leaders of every nation gathered. The situation was dire. The Zorath fleet was massive, and they were closing in fast. Humanity's military was no match for such advanced technology. Weapons like Earth's nuclear bombs were nothing more than toys in comparison to what the Zorath wielded. Captain Jake Callahan, a young but highly skilled officer, stood among the world leaders as they discussed humanity's fate. His brow furrowed with worry, but his face remained stoic. He was known for his calmness under pressure, and now more than ever, his leadership would be put to the test. The Earth's defense systems were outdated, and humanity had no clear plan. As Jake glanced around the room, he saw fear in the eyes of those around him. For the first time, the human race truly understood that they were no longer at the top of the food chain. The Zorath had conquered entire star systems effortlessly, and now they had set their sights on Earth. No one could say for certain what would happen next. Would Earth be reduced to ashes like the others? Or would humanity find a way to fight back against an enemy that was, quite literally, out of this world? "We need to buy time," Jake spoke up, his voice cutting through the tense silence. "Our only chance is to delay them long enough to develop a strategy. We need to deploy all available military resources, now." His words echoed in the room, but the doubt in the eyes of the leaders made it clear they weren't entirely convinced. "I understand your concern, Captain," one of the world leaders replied. "But the Zorath's technology is beyond anything we've ever seen. How can we stand against them?" Jake clenched his fists, his mind racing. He wasn't sure how, but he knew humanity had something the Zorath didn't, the will to fight for survival. He'd seen it in every human he had ever known, the relentless spirit to protect those they loved. If they were going to survive, they would have to use every advantage they had, no matter how small. The meeting continued for hours, with more discussions about Earth's defenses. The scientists revealed they had detected a strange energy signature coming from deep space. It wasn't something Earth could identify, but it was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The Zorath's weapons could potentially destroy entire cities with a single strike, and their fleet was enormous, far larger than any Earth army. As Jake stood on the observation deck later that night, looking out over the city below, he couldn't help but feel a sinking weight in his chest. The stars above were cold, distant, and uncaring. He knew the Zorath were coming, and Earth was their next target. But as he thought about his family, his friends, and all the people he loved, something inside him refused to accept that Earth's story would end this way. A voice broke his thoughts. It was Sarah, his colleague and close friend. "Do you think we can win this?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Jake turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. "I don't know," he admitted. "But we'll die fighting if we have to. We have no choice but to stand strong." The two shared a moment of silence, knowing that their world had just changed forever. The Zorath were coming, and humanity had to prepare. The countdown had begun. The Zorath warships were no longer a distant threat. They were here, and Earth was about to face the most dangerous battle of its existence. Cliffhanger. As the first alien warship appeared on Earth's radar, the tension in the room was palpable. The Zorath had arrived, and there was no turning back now. The battle for Earth had just begun. As the news of the Zorath fleet's arrival spread across Earth, panic began to ripple through every city. People had no idea what was coming, and many tried to flee, seeking shelter in underground bunkers or remote areas. But for Captain Jake Callahan and the leaders of Earth's military, there was no time for fear, only action. Jake stood in a command center, surrounded by flashing screens and urgent reports. The human race had been caught off guard, but they weren't going to go down without a fight. The most advanced human technology, though far behind the Zoraths, was being mobilized as quickly as possible. Earth's fleet of ships, hastily refitted with whatever weapons could be spared, was ready for action. Yet Jake knew they would be outmatched. The Zorath fleet was not just large, it was lethal. "We can't match their firepower," one of the generals said grimly, staring at the holographic projection of the enemy fleet. The Zorath ships glowed ominously, their vast size dwarfing anything humanity had. "But we can make them pay for every inch they take." The plan was simple. Delay the Zorath long enough for humanity's engineers to develop new weapons, something that might give them a fighting chance. Jake and his team knew they couldn't defeat the Zorath head-on, but they had to slow them down, stop them from getting any closer to Earth. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Soldiers, engineers, and pilots worked around the clock, checking weapons, testing new cloaking devices, and deploying drones designed to sabotage alien technology. Meanwhile, every communication channel was flooded with messages of hope, urging humanity to fight back together. Jake spent most of his time overseeing military strategies, making sure every possible angle was covered. But he couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung in the air. Each time he looked at the Zorath ships on the radar, he saw the unstoppable advance of an alien force that had destroyed civilizations far more powerful than Earth. One night, as Jake sat alone, reviewing data, Sarah entered the room, a worried look on her face. "Jake, we're ready." "But are you?" she asked quietly, her voice full of concern. Jake looked at her, his face set with determination. "We don't have a choice, Sarah. We fight or we die. And I'll be damned if I let them take our home." With the final touches on their defense systems, humanity stood on the brink of war. The Zorath were almost within firing range. The countdown to Earth's first major battle had begun, and there was no turning back. The moment humanity had been dreading arrived faster than anyone expected. The Zorath fleet, vast and terrifying, was now just hours away from Earth's orbit. The defense systems, rushed into place with all the speed Earth could muster, stood ready, but Jake Callahan knew they were just a small obstacle in the face of the unstoppable alien force. This would be humanity's first true test. Would they stand strong, or would they be crushed under the weight of an empire far beyond their reach? Jake stood at the command center with Sarah, watching as the radar showed the Zorath warships approaching. His heart raced, but he couldn't let fear take over. Every decision now counted. Every move had to be perfect. The first strike came just as they predicted, a series of laser blasts that tore through space like a storm. The beams of energy struck Earth's atmosphere with terrifying force. Humanity's ships fought back fiercely, launching everything they had. Fighter jets zoomed into space, their engines screaming as they went head-to-head with the alien vessels. Missiles and lasers shot through the night sky, but the Zorath shields barely flickered. Their ships were too advanced, their armor too thick. "We're not making a dent," one of the pilots shouted over the communication line as his fighter was struck by a Zorath blast. The ship exploded in a fireball, sending a shockwave through the fleet. Jake clenched his fists. This was it. The humans were being outmatched, but they refused to back down. In every corner of the battlefield, soldiers, pilots, and commanders pushed themselves to the limit. The human spirit was their greatest weapon, even if their technology wasn't up to par. Amidst the chaos, Jake's command ship, the Titan, took heavy damage. A blast rocked the vessel, sending it into a tailspin. Jake struggled to stay calm as alarms blared in the background, but he kept his focus. "Report!" he shouted to the bridge crew. "Shields down by 40%. We've lost contact with the rear flank." The technician's voice was panicked, but Jake knew they had no time for fear. "Reroute power to the rear shields," Jake ordered. "We can't afford to lose anyone." In the midst of the struggle, a glimmer of hope emerged. Earth's newly developed superweapon, a massive cannon designed to pierce the Zorath's impenetrable defenses, was ready to fire. Jake's team had worked tirelessly for days to make sure this weapon would work. With their remaining ships creating a protective ring, the Titan positioned itself in the center. Jake knew this was their only chance. With one final push, they fired the superweapon at the closest Zorath ship. The shot echoed through space, a burst of raw energy that flew through the dark void. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then the cannon struck. The Zorath warship staggered, its shield flickering and finally giving way. The explosion that followed was deafening, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The human fleet cheered, a moment of triumph amidst the chaos. But Jake's victory was short-lived. The Zorath fleet retaliated almost instantly. One by one, Zorath ships fired upon Earth's defenses, disintegrating anything in their path. The humans had made a dent, but they were still vastly outnumbered. Jake felt his heart sink as he watched wave after wave of missiles rain down from the alien ships. "We need to retreat," a voice crackled over the comms. The suggestion made sense. There was no way to win this fight without reinforcements. But Jake knew retreat was a hard choice. "Not yet," Jake said firmly, his voice steady despite the pounding in his chest. "We hold the line. We don't give them an inch." The Zorath, surprised by humanity's resilience, prepared for the next stage of the invasion. And as Earth's military fought to the last, one thing was clear. The first strike was over, but the war had only just begun. Cliffhanger. As the Zorath fleet prepared their next wave, the ground beneath them seemed to tremble. Jake knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Earth had struck a blow, but the battle had only just begun. The war had reached a critical point. The Zorath Empire's fleet had pummeled Earth's defenses, and humanity was on the brink of collapse. Earth's cities were in ruins, and the skies were filled with the burning wreckage of fallen warships. The Zorath were relentless, their technology too advanced for anything humanity had left to throw at them. But amidst the chaos and destruction, there was still a flicker of hope: the human spirit. Captain Jake Callahan stood in the command center of the Titan, his face hard with determination. Earth had lost almost half of its fleet, and many of the remaining forces were scattered, their communication systems crippled. Yet Jake refused to let his people give up. He knew humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons, but in their ability to fight against impossible odds. "We can't afford to lose any more ships," Jake said to Sarah, who stood by his side, her face just as serious. "If we do, Earth is finished. This is our last shot." Sarah nodded. "We need to make every move count. We can't just rely on brute force. We need to outsmart them." The Zorath fleet had begun to circle the Earth, preparing for a final strike that would obliterate the last of humanity's resistance. It was clear the Zorath were planning to launch a devastating bombardment that would wipe out the remaining human forces. Earth's cities were now unrecognizable piles of rubble, but the last human stronghold, a fortified base hidden deep beneath the Earth's surface, was still holding. "Do we have a plan?" Sarah asked. Jake took a deep breath, his mind racing. He knew they didn't have the firepower to stop the Zorath directly, but there had to be something they could do to turn the tide. "We do," Jake said with a glint of resolve in his eyes. "It's not about fighting head-on anymore. It's about doing what the Zorath never expected." The plan was risky, but it was their only chance. Earth's last remaining superweapon, a series of underground missiles capable of targeting Zorath ships directly, was their only hope. The Zorath had never encountered anything like it. Jake had to gamble everything on this one strike. If they could hit the Zorath fleet in their blind spot, where their shields were weakest, they might be able to cripple their ships long enough for humanity to escape. The operation was set into motion, and the remaining human forces mobilized. Thousands of soldiers, engineers, and pilots braved the danger, working tirelessly to prepare the underground missile systems. Meanwhile, the Zorath fleet continued its relentless approach, oblivious to the trap humanity was preparing for them. Jake watched from the Titan as the Zorath ships came into range. The time had come. The missiles were ready to launch. But as Jake ordered the countdown to begin, something unexpected happened. One of Earth's last remaining fighters, piloted by a young soldier named Emily, came into view, desperately dodging incoming fire. "Emily, get back to base!" Jake shouted into the comms, but the young pilot's voice was steady and determined. "I'm not running, Captain. I'll keep them distracted." "You've got this." Jake's heart skipped a beat. Emily's bravery was inspiring, but he knew the risks she was taking. With no time to argue, he refocused on the mission. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3. Jake's voice was steady, even as his nerves twisted in his chest. Earth's future was hanging by a thread. The Zorath ships loomed closer, their massive guns charging for the final strike. The human fleet had nothing left to defend Earth except their desperate gamble. Jake's eyes never left the radar screen. 2, 1. The missiles launched. A series of flashes lit up the sky as the missiles fired toward the Zorath fleet. The human forces watched in silence, holding their breath as the warheads sped toward their targets. Would this be enough? Would Earth's final strike be enough to stop the invincible enemy? The first missile hit its mark. The Zorath ship closest to Earth exploded in a fiery blast, sending shock waves through space. But that wasn't the end. The other missiles followed, striking one after another, each explosion bigger than the last. The Zorath fleet faltered, their shields weakening. The humans had done it. For the first time in the battle, the tide had shifted. However, the Zorath were far from defeated. Their remaining ships immediately retaliated, launching a barrage of counterattacks. Earth's defenses were crumbling, but the final strike had made a difference. The Zorath were no longer as invincible as they once seemed. As the battle raged on, humanity's spirit remained unbroken. The war wasn't over yet, but Earth had delivered a blow that the Zorath could never have expected. And that was all they needed: hope. Cliffhanger. As the Zorath fleet regrouped, a new threat appeared on the horizon, something even more terrifying than the first wave. The battle for Earth was far from over. The Zorath fleet had suffered massive losses, but their power was far from broken. Earth's final strike had shaken them, but it hadn't defeated them. Captain Jake Callahan knew that this was humanity's last chance to survive. He could see it in the faces of his crew: fear, determination, and hope, all mixed together. They had fought long and hard, but now they faced the hardest test of all. The Zorath weren't just going to surrender. They were coming for Earth with everything they had left. As the battle raged above, Earth's remaining ships and forces regrouped for one final defense. The underground missile silos had done their job, but now it was up to the last of humanity's fleet to hold the line. In the command center of the Titan, Jake stood with Sarah, staring out at the stars. The Zorath ships were closing in fast. It was now or never. "We have to make this count," Jake said, his voice steady but heavy with the weight of responsibility. Sarah nodded. "We've got one shot at this. We need to hold them off just long enough for our backup reinforcements to arrive." The air crackled with tension as the night sky above Earth lit up with strange lights. A massive alien ship had just crash-landed in a remote area. It wasn't the first alien ship to land on Earth, but this one was different. The rumors had spread like wildfire across military bases. This wasn't just a regular encounter. This was the moment that could change everything. On the ground, soldiers in advanced suits stood ready, waiting for orders. Among them was Alex, a tall, strong, and determined soldier, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had fought in many battles, but this was unlike anything he had ever faced. It wasn't just an alien ship. No, the situation was much worse. Alex's orders were clear: capture anything alive from the crash and bring it back to the military base for questioning. As the military vehicles roared to life and headed toward the crash site, Alex felt an unsettling feeling deep in his gut. He wasn't sure why, but something about this mission didn't sit right. He had heard that the alien ship contained something or someone incredibly valuable, but it didn't explain why the higher-ups had been so secretive about the details. When they reached the wreckage, the team was stunned. The massive ship had torn through the trees like a hot knife through butter, but there was no sign of the usual chaos. Instead, everything was eerily quiet. Alex stepped forward, motioning for his team to follow, the sound of their boots crunching on the ground echoing in the silence. Inside the twisted remains of the alien craft, they found her. A young alien girl, bound in chains, was sprawled on the cold metal floor, her eyes wide with terror. She was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with an otherworldly glow, the color shifting from a dark shade of purple to a soft, ethereal blue. Her long, silver hair cascaded down her back, glinting under the broken lights of the ship. She was beautiful, but there was something haunting about her eyes filled with pain, fear, and confusion. As Alex moved closer, his heart clenched. He had been briefed that the alien race was known for their cruelty, but seeing her in person was different. She wasn't a soldier or an invader, she was just a girl, terrified and helpless. The others in Alex's team muttered amongst themselves, talking about how valuable she could be as a prisoner, but Alex wasn't so sure. He could see the way she trembled, her body bruised and battered from the crash. She was no threat. If anything, she looked more like a victim. "Get her up!" a commanding officer barked, breaking Alex from his thoughts. "We've got orders to take her back. She's going to be interrogated." The alien girl flinched at the sound of the human voice, her chains clinking as she shifted in fear. Alex looked at her, his mind racing. There was no way he could just let them treat her like this. He took a step forward, his voice calm but firm. "No, we're not going to treat her like an animal." His words surprised even him. He had been trained to follow orders, to never question authority. But in that moment, something deep inside him told him that this was wrong. The commanding officer, taken aback by Alex's defiance, narrowed his eyes. "What are you talking about? We need her for questioning. We don't have time for this." But Alex didn't back down. He knew he had to make a choice. And in that instant, he made it. "Leave her alone," Alex said, his voice steady and resolute. "I'll take her." There was a heavy silence. The rest of the team exchanged confused glances, unsure of what to do. They had orders, but Alex had just made a bold move. The commanding officer opened his mouth to argue, but Alex quickly raised his hand, signaling for them to halt. "She's not going anywhere with anyone else," Alex said. "She's coming with me." Against all odds, Alex took control of the situation, carefully lifting the young alien girl into his arms. Her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and fear. She tried to pull away, but Alex's grip was gentle. He wasn't going to hurt her. He wanted to protect her. As they walked away from the wreckage, Alex couldn't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility. What was he doing? Taking a captive alien girl back to base wasn't part of the plan. But in that moment, all he could think about was how scared she looked, and how, somehow, he couldn't leave her to face whatever terrible fate awaited her. The rest of the team followed behind, still unsure about Alex's decision. The girl in his arms remained silent, but her eyes never left his face. She was watching him closely, studying him with curiosity and fear. This was just the beginning. As Alex carried the alien girl through the dark forest toward the waiting military convoy, he couldn't help but feel an odd sense of protectiveness. She wasn't a soldier, and she certainly wasn't the threat that everyone thought she was. There was something fragile about her, something that made him want to keep her safe. But he knew he couldn't explain this feeling. It was crazy. After all, she was an alien, the enemy. Right? Once they reached the convoy, the team wasted no time in securing her, locking her in a small guarded transport ship. Alex sat beside her, his eyes constantly scanning for danger. The girl sat in the corner, her eyes filled with suspicion and fear, glancing around the ship like she was ready to make a break for it at any moment. She didn't trust him, and Alex couldn't blame her. He was a soldier, and soldiers followed orders. He had to remind himself that he was no different than the others who captured her. He had only taken her because he felt something wasn't right. But deep down, he had no idea what to do with her now. He couldn't just let her go, not when Earth was in danger from other alien forces. Alex broke the silence first. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien girl didn't respond, but she looked at him, her eyes narrowed. It was clear she didn't understand him, but something in her gaze told him she could sense his sincerity. Maybe he wasn't like the others, the ones who saw her as nothing more than a tool or a prize to be used. For days, Alex and the girl stayed in the military facility, the tension between them thick. She never spoke, and Alex wasn't sure how to communicate with her. At first, all he could do was keep her in a secure room, but that felt wrong. So he started bringing her food and tried to teach her simple words in English. It wasn't much, but Alex could see the girl's eyes soften every time he did something kind for her. She began to relax a little, though still cautious. She hadn't shown any signs of aggression, but every movement she made was guarded. It was clear she didn't want to get too close to him. Then one night, as Alex sat outside her room, he heard a soft noise. He turned, and there she was standing at the door. Her eyes locked with his, and for the first time, Alex saw a small spark of curiosity in them. "I'm not going to hurt you," he repeated, this time softer. Slowly, she stepped closer. Her movements were hesitant, but there was something in the way she looked at him. Maybe it was trust. Maybe it was a need for connection. Over the next few days, something unexpected began to happen. The girl, whose name Alex had learned was Zara, started to open up, not with words but with actions. She started following him around, quietly watching him when he worked, and even helping him when he least expected it. Alex began to see her as more than just a prisoner. She wasn't just an alien. She was someone who had been through unimaginable pain and hardship. Someone who needed help. And somehow he felt responsible for her now. Zara was still unsure of Alex's intentions, but she had started to see that he wasn't like the others. With each passing day, the walls between them began to crumble. They shared small moments of trust. When she handed him a tool he had dropped, or when he smiled at her after a small victory in their daily routines. It was the beginning of something that neither of them could have predicted. Their bond was growing, slowly but surely. They were both two lost souls in a world that had thrown them together for reasons neither understood. And maybe, just maybe, that connection would lead to something more. The days passed, and life at the military base grew more tense. Every new piece of information about the alien forces coming toward Earth seemed worse than the last. Alex was doing everything he could to keep the base secure, but it was clear they were outmatched. The aliens had technology far beyond what humanity had ever seen. Despite this, there was something Alex couldn't ignore: Zara. She had started to open up more. Her eyes no longer held only fear when she looked at him, but something else. Something that made him feel like they were beginning to understand each other. She still didn't speak, but her actions spoke volumes. She helped Alex in small ways, passing him tools when he needed them, cleaning up when no one else would. It was as though she was trying to show him that she could be trusted. One afternoon, the base received troubling news. A massive fleet of alien ships was headed toward Earth. There was no time to prepare for a full-scale war. The generals ordered all soldiers to be on high alert, and Alex found himself training harder than ever before. His role as a leader grew more important by the day, and the weight of it began to take its toll.